I'm a man who believed that I died 20 years ago, and I live like a man who is dead already. I have no fear whatsoever of anybody or anything.
Gary Webb. I am an investigative journalist, and in 1996, I wrote a series of stories entitled Dark Alliance, which was about CIA involvement in drug trafficking.
I knew a man who once said death smiles at us all. All a man can do is smile back.
We've opened Skull and Bone, the secret society. It's so secret we can't talk about it. What does that mean for America? The conspiracy theorists are going to go on. I'm sure they are. I don't know. I haven't seen the rest. Number 322.
I sad duty to report this afternoon that my friend and colleague, Tim Russert, collapsed and died early this afternoon.
I may die in this cell tonight or in the arena tomorrow. I am a slave. What possible difference can I make?
And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
What's up?
What's
I was
up,
just
buddy?
bopping in the background. What's up, guys? Welcome to Already Dead. Here we are. I don't know what happened, but I feel like I'm normally on the other side of the screen here. But whatever.
You
It's
are.
throwing me off a little bit. But, oh well, I'll be used to the right side of the screen for now. Welcome to Already Dead, guys. Our call-in show. I will, in about 45 minutes to an hour in the middle of the show, we'll go into do like a kind of a call-in thing. This is where patrons, people who pay, or if we give out the link or whatever to like buddies or whatever, you'll be able to come on the show, or you can just call in with a call-in number. But till then, we're just gonna kind of shoot the shit, talk about the latest in the world of parapolitics and such. I think the biggest thing, I guess this sort of qualifies as parapolitics, but I guess I feel like we're probably gonna be talking about Candace Owens a lot this week.
Christ is king, my brother.
Yeah, Christ is king. Yeah, to be clear, this is probably the first week that I really wanted to really say Christ is king. Because for those who know, I mean, I don't know about your particular religious persuasions. I'm not religious at all. I'm not Christian. But I mean, I am like very friendly to the Christian faith. I was raised that way. And, I've gotten past my Reddit atheist phase and kind of circled back to where like I'm now the atheist that like, the agnostic atheist, for those who want to get all upset, but like an agnostic. For those who aren't clear, I've said this on the show many times. It always irks me a little bit. I guess I'm being a little bit like pedantic when people say, like make fun of atheists and like as if they're making a positive claim there is no God. And like there are atheists to do that. That would be a Gnostic atheist. And that's why I always say agnostic atheist. Those are separate questions. Gnosticism or agnosticism. Obviously there's Gnosticism, the faith, but like it also means to know. So to be Gnostic or agnostic, these are different questions. Theist, atheist. Gnostic, agnostic is a question of belief. The theism, atheism is a question of Gnostic, agnostic is a question of knowledge. Theism, atheism is a question of belief. So, like, the idea, if you're an agnostic atheist, I'm making no positive claim. I don't know there is a God, but I don't believe in one. So that's where I am. But this week, I really wanted to scream to the rooftops, Christ is king, just because I know, with everything, which I guess we'll kind of get into that. It's been a wild ride. I don't know about you, but I've been kind of like, maybe I've just gotten good at this, but I just felt like I was like calling this shit as it was happening and stuff ahead of time. Like I just saw the like conservative ink propaganda game playing out as it was going. It was just so transparent. Like you know what I mean? I mean, I have some clips we could probably play through to kind of go through the saga if we want to go that deep. Before we can do, I do want to make a call out. Me and you, we talked about this a little bit. I'm just kind of putting this out there. This is not paid whatsoever, but I'm just offering to some fan out there, because I think that's the ideal person for this. I'd like to get a producer for this show. If anyone's interested, if you're available on generally Tuesdays around this time, and you have some sort of skill set, or just, which isn't really, I don't feel like you have to be that good. I'm pretty retarded when it comes to computers, and I'm getting that. So really, all this would entail is someone just sitting in the background here, like, off screen, bringing up maybe pictures here, or sources or whatever for us as we ask for them or as seems appropriate. And, also to manage the phone lines. Because I don't know if you guys noticed this. You guys might see my mouth moving sometimes and no sound coming out during the phone section. And also there's the additional issue of that, like, with the phone thing, they can't talk to, like, you, Austin, or any guests we have. They can only talk to me. And so then essentially anytime someone calls in, I have to put them in the back and go, hey, just hold on a minute, I'll bring you in. And I'm too retarded to figure out how to mute them, so then I have to, like, shut up and wait to enter the conversation and bring them in with me. So
Right.
And then I have a lot of different noises going on in my ear at once. So it'd probably be something that'd be helpful to have a producer. So if someone's interested in that, it's not paying. Maybe, who knows, one day this will get huge, and we'll fucking pay you. But that's a ways off in the future. But I don't know. So I know that's something that people like to do. That's how we got a few different Tower Gang producers. They just kind of fucking hopped on and want to do it. We've never paid them a fucking cent. So we don't make that much off that either. So for those who, we don't actually, in a certain sense, we don't really make any money. All of it goes back into the show or just sits until we wait for it to put it into the show. But yes, anyways, we're putting that out there, an offer for a producer, if anyone's interested. But I guess with that, let's also, I do want to remind you guys, for the call-in section, that's when we kind of start going into the, if we don't have callers, or or someone who wants to come on the video chat side of things, we will probably going to go through the chat. So I've been kind of working from the oldest and going to the newest, so just letting you guys know, I know you guys chat in here when we're not really bringing it up and we're kind of just shooting the shit, but that doesn't mean we won't bring it up later. So just letting you guys know, you guys' chats may or may not get brought up later. I don't have a super chat function because I got demonetized forever ago. So, there's no way to kind of filter it. So put something good. That's all I can say. I don't know. What's been going on with you this past week? I already forgot. You did something. God, what was the most recent episode you did? You did something.
It's still the Beast of Belgium. I'm definitely my next rabbit hole will be Watergate, and I'm jumping down that rabbit hole as we speak. But yeah, it probably won't be ready until the end of the week, honestly. But really, I just think it's you saw that ship crashed in Baltimore earlier today, right? And
I have not paid much attention to that, but yeah, go
I
ahead.
haven't either, honestly, as far as like what is there to really know as of yet. There's really just only theories that have been put out so far, but I did see that Andrew Tate said that it was like, he mentioned that it was potentially some deliberate attack on the U.S. infrastructure and as a black swan event, and I would just say that at the very least it's plausible, but I will say the thing that kind of convinced me to really consider this a little deeper is the fact that it did seem to veer toward the bridge supports, and so that alone, I was a little bit skeptical of how this could have happened. I did see that somebody said it was Owen Benjamin's fault because the Pajeets were upset, and so they were basically retaliating. But I thought that was hilarious. Probably my favorite theory as of yet. But honestly, I think there's more to that story. Probably it could have just been some sort of pilot error or power outage of some kind, which I've seen people claim as well. But it is just suspicious. I even saw Richard say something about how the timing was suspicious, or at least seemingly that was the implication of what he was saying, because of how it basically came out. And this happened right as it came out that Putin blamed American intelligence for the Moscow attacks. and at least said that they had a heavy hand in it, is what it seems like, and that there was an escape route that had been set up for these Tajiks that were allegedly members of ISIS-K could then evacuate and escape Russia through this channel into Ukraine. So who knows? But it definitely seems like some sort of, and like you just said earlier, at least privately to me, about Victoria Nuland. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
About Victoria Nuland allegedly saying something to the effect of Russia, better be careful, or what did she say exactly? I can't remember.
Something along the lines of I once again, I haven't dug deep. The funny thing, between the bridge story and the Russia story, which I guess were kind of like the two main things most like people were kind of following this week, I haven't followed for shit. But I did listen to like an episode, and I do obviously have my pattern recognition that just kind of like instantly kicks in, and just things I notice. But these aren't like developed thoughts where I've actually looked at the sources. But I can kind of give you my like very not well informed kind of, but informed by like kind of past other things. But what I was listening to my buddy Clint Russell, his show Liberty Lockdown today. And he was saying in that I guess recently, I don't know exactly when this happened. This was, I guess, shortly before Victoria Nuland left, what she was doing.
Right.
I forget what her fucking post, her position technically even was. But essentially it was the devil or something like that.
Exactly.
But she made some comments along the lines of essentially assisting Ukraine with asymmetric warfare, and then something along the lines of how there would be surprises for Russia in the future, which seemed weird, like, kind of like a glib little like hint.
Veiled threat,
Yeah, and this does remind me a lot of, I don't know, kind of like Gladio type stuff, just kind of like the little bits I've heard here and there, kind of like their escape plans. And then I also found it interesting that I guess supposedly, according to them, which take this with a huge grain of salt because these guys were obviously being tortured like a motherfucker. So I don't know how much you want to value this information coming from them, but I don't know, kind of comports to what I would think a modern day, Gladio or something along those lines would work. Apparently they made claims that they were contacted by people on some sort of, those different chat apps of some sort. I'm not tech savvy, so like the Discords or whatever the fuck.
Signal type app or
Signal,
something.
Something like that. And they were contacted, given money, kind of given, whatever aid they need. And like, I feel like personally, if there was modern day Gladio of some sort, it probably would present itself in a similar way. You'd think they'd get smarter in a 21st century type situation to where they would learn to distance themselves a little bit further away from it, essentially, along those lines. But obviously, I think ISIS claimed credit for it, or at least some.
ISIS-K or something,
Yeah, I don't know how legit that is, but even then, obviously, there's parapolitics angles there. Like,
I saw so many people were like, oh, I think even Namrock did a meme where they took the face off of ISIS-K or ISIS in general, and it was just the CIA crest, which is perfect. Yeah. But I mean, we all know at least the Al-Qaeda connections and Operation Cyclone, which was, creating the modern day Al-Qaeda through funding and arming up the Afghan Mujahideen, right? And specifically the more radical groups, jihadist groups than the less religious, as far as I found that interesting. I mean, it makes sense, but of course. So like for me, I expect that ISIS is state sponsored in many ways. And that is the primary reason that they aren't entirely vanquished in many areas, and including, I mean, we already know they were granted safe haven in eastern Syria during that time, and all they were doing was harassing the Bashar al-Assad's Free Syrian Army and causing domestic gladios, sort of, right, domestic terrorism, and just attempting to cause chaos and undermine the established government in Syria, which of course was a primary target for the military-industrial complex to attempt a regime change operation there, but you know,
it's also nice that Syria is considered part of Greater Israel. There's no
right.
just noticing coincidences.
Right. Exactly. Don't get into that, man. No.
Oh, cool. I just saw one of my buddies said he'll call in when the time comes. I will let you know. It's just a quick little call in.
Awesome.
But yes, I do want to bring up like let's get into the Candace thing.
Let's do it.
This obviously this has been something that's been brewing for a while, but I saw that Rabbi Barclay thing, and I don't ever really watch any of these fucking Daily Wire shows, like, ever.
Right.
And I don't know, not even really throw any shade at them. I mean, don't get me wrong, I see clips every now and then where I'm like, oh, okay, that's pretty decent. I mean, I can't listen to Shapiro for the life of me. I mean, I've seen some bits of Knowles where he has some interesting points. Walsh sometimes. You know, I don't know. I only recently started paying attention every now and then to Candace, just kind of because of what was going on. You know, I think the only time I can recall ever watching a Candace episode is when Dave went on, and then I watched this Barclay episode, that Rabbi, where it was essentially a struggle session, and then I also watched the subsequent episode, which I wasn't going to, but then I got a bunch of like. I think it was Mayor Kate, I believe.
Really?
Some people may know her. She was in
She's
a few
cool,
comments
man.
she's cool. When I made a few tweets here and there about it, you know, kind of clipped up some stuff from there and posted out. And she, I think on a couple of them, made a point about, you know, kind of alluding to something being significant about the following episode, which was kind of like more of a solo episode, and that was her last episode at Daily Wire.
Okay.
And you know, we'll get to that. I want to play a clip from the Barclay episode because I do find that interesting. But her last episode of Daily Wire, I found it to be, I really was like at the end of the episode, like something big is happening. Like, and I clipped that, so we'll play that. I think we'll play two clips. I think I want to play this clip from the Barclay interview, just because I found it to be kind of interesting and kind of gleans kind of the crux of the issue here. Essentially, this rabbi came on. It was essentially a struggle session because he wrote some smear piece about how she's an anti-Semite or some dumb bullshit. And she didn't push back much at all. She literally just kind of let him talk, and he fell apart. And, you know, from the beginning of this episode, they start off with defining what anti-Semitism is, and off the bat he says it's like a shifting definition that's shifted throughout history and blah 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 blah, and you see over time what this really is. And I feel like this, especially the introductory little line, really reveals what the crux of what quote unquote anti-Semitism is when you talk to these guys. But all right, I'm gonna go ahead and play it. It's a minute and a half long. If you want me to stop it, just let me know and I'll pause it or whatever if you have anything to say. But I did find this interesting.
I am telling you with absolute authority that what you are saying about Hollywood is anti-Semitic. There's not this is what theologians, this is constant, and it is an expression of a blood libel going back to 1144. You're saying, well, I don't mean to hurt someone. Okay. If I apologize to you, my apology would be, gee, I apologize. I'm sorry for what I did. I'm sorry. Not, I'm sorry for how you feel.
Well, no, I genuinely am sorry if you interpreted my suspicion. I genuinely am sorry if you interpreted that, like, my suspicion about a gang operating Hollywood to be some sort of a condemnation of all Jews. It's actually the exact opposite, which is why I specifically named.
I'm telling you that.
Are you going to let me speak? That is the reason why I specifically named Rabbi Shmuley, who was listed by Michael Jackson, who has been listed multiple times and who I believe operates like a gang member by his threats that he's been saying against me, that he's going to bankrupt me. I'm not going to pretend that I don't think that Rabbi Shmuley operates like a thug, and I'm going to withhold me stating that clearly because you're saying, well, that leans into an anti-Semitic trope. Him being Jewish doesn't mean anything to me. Him acting like a thug and making threats against my life and livelihood is something that...
All right, yep, that was it. I just found it very interesting because, like I put in the tweet there, so this reveals the crux of the issue. In this context, in far too many examples, claims of anti-Semitism are simply just making note of feeling offended and demanding contrition for their perceived slight. This is synonymous with all other forms of identity politics and is beyond infantilizing to be asked to take the glorified lamentations of hurt feelings with any level of seriousness. I refuse to play this game. Call me an anti-Semite, racist, misogynist, meanie pants, etc. I don't give a fuck. I'm going to keep it moving. And that is exactly what it is. As you could tell from the first line, I'm telling you with absolute authority. It literally is, fucking LGBTQ, Black Lives Matter, leftist identity politics, or, colloquially speaking leftist, because clearly, I guess depends on how you want to, define it. Obviously, this pervades the right. He constantly referred to how he's a conservative, has done so much conservative stuff, blah, 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 blah. But this is his reasoning when it comes to argumentation for this. And the funny thing is, I bet you he'd be the same guy to point this out if it was like Black Lives Matter or some bullshit. But they essentially allow themselves to own the definition, how it's defined. And then, because in this point, just preceding this, she kind of laid out a point about, and she kind of brought sources. I forget specifically what she's talking about, but kind of like Hollywood and, the Jews and stuff. And she was making factual points, and he was actually kind of saying, in that clip, which maybe if you had further context, you might get it, that he was essentially saying it doesn't really matter whether it's true or not what you're saying. What is matter is that we feel offended, and so essentially you should say sorry.
Exactly.
So, I mean, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. I thought that was extremely revealing. That first line, I'm telling you with absolute authority.
Exactly.
The idea that you are the one who determines that this is anti-Semitism or whatever. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it really did seem like he was demanding an apology and a change of your opinion, not just an apology. You have to change your opinion to form to the Zionist perspective. I mean, that's clearly what's happening, right? So I thought Candace handled all of this, I mean, perfectly, honestly. I would have just made a complete ass of myself, most likely, just because there's absolutely no way I would ever even have that conversation in the first place. I don't know. I don't see it. People like Candace, and I admire people like that because they seem to, and Dave as well. Dave's amazing at it. He seems to have these conversations with people that are entirely in opposition to his ideology, his worldview, and he still will sit down with them and honestly approach a conversation and with the best of intentions. And I admire the hell out of people who are who have that ability. I don't know. I don't see it as, other than exposing them for what they are.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. What else is the point?
Yeah.
And I mean, but that is very valuable. So
yeah, I mean, I could maybe see myself doing something like that, but it's generally not my style. I'm not one to sit there and argue with someone about whether I'm a racist, anti-Semite, whatever. Right. I'm far more apt to go, okay, and just move on. Yeah, I don't I just genuinely don't give a fuck. And I feel like to some extent, I guess there's usefulness. I do think what Candace did here was, very revealing and very important for people to see. But in a certain sense, I also do think it takes away the power when you're like, okay, definitely. What?
I do.
I don't know if you saw, which I guess this kind of to some extent makes this point. And obviously we're jumping forward a little bit. But I think most people know what happened with Candace. She's no longer, and actually I already said it just a minute ago, she's no longer working for Daily Wire. But I don't know if you saw Rabbi Shmuley today, or maybe it was yesterday. He put out some tweet. Jeremy Boring called him an attention whore. Because he really recently went on, after Candace got fired, he went this weird tirade where he made himself out to be the most anti-Semitic caricature you possibly could, give himself a big fake nose, all that. And then someone, I don't remember why Jeremy Boring felt the need to pop in. Someone, I don't know if tagged him or what, but he said something along the lines of, I haven't really paid attention to him much. And Jeremy Boring, for those who don't know, that's essentially, I think the guy who essentially runs Daily Wire. Kind of does all the management type stuff, I believe. Right. But he said, he's an attention whore. I don't know much about this guy, but from what I've seen, he's kind of an attention whore. Because with that crazy display with Shmuley, a lot of people that were even on his side were kind of like, dude, what are you doing?
Right.
And with that, with that attention whore fucking comment, maybe I'll look for it later. Actually, no, I'm not going to. It's too long and it's stupid. But then he went on this whole giant tirade, made this giant mega post and with video that was like something retarded, like 8 minutes. I watched it just because I was curious, but I wish I could get that time back. But
Right.
he essentially went on this whole tirade about how essentially they didn't do enough, that they platformed her for this long, how there's like he literally was equating the terminology of calling him an attention whore to misogyny. Like, why'd you choose that word? Like I don't know.
Wow.
I feel like even the most leftist person in the world that like would find themselves calling someone an attention whore, and they aren't necessarily. And yeah, maybe someone would say, well, that's kind of misogynist language, and they go, yeah, you're right, but they would just like use it, not even know it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, because it's just such a common turn of phrase. It's not meaning you're literally sucking dick behind a fucking dumpster.
Yeah, no shit.
And yeah, he went this whole tirade essentially about how it wasn't enough, blah blah blah, picking away at other little comments, but literally what started that fucking spiral in that specific situation was the fucking attention whore comment, which is the most subtle comment he possibly could have said. I mean, maybe he could have downplayed it a tiny bit, but it really wasn't a harsh comment at all, which was weird. But I'm kind of
as prominent as Shmuley is right now. He just seems so much like some sort of political operative. Like, I don't know. I mean, maybe he does truly believe the things that he is saying, but the way that he's going about it, right? It's just, I don't believe that people, I mean, I do believe that people behave that way naturally, but due to, being completely radicalized by their ideological belief system but at the same time, like certain people who especially become such pivotal, I mean, who doesn't know Rabbi Shmuley now, as of right now, like that are at least even around this topic of discussion. I mean, you have at the very least, you've been exposed to this man, and he just in every way seems like, I will say though, like, yes, there might, I would at least agree that there is probably a rise in anti-Semitism to a certain extent, but that tends to happen when you are in the midst of a war which isn't really a war, in my perspective. And what is it? I mean, how many casualties? Over 30,000 now, right?
I mean, there was also a lot of anti-Nazism in World War II, so
right.
Makes sense at that point in time. Obviously,
it's so crazy,
I might get in trouble for that one, but I don't give a shit.
That's right.
But the point being is when some party, may not even be all of them. I mean, obviously, all Nazis might be the bad example because they're part of that entity. But I guess you could pick any other war. Would be a good example that may work better. I guess you could say anti-Germany-ism at that time.
Right.
That might be a better example to use than Nazism. It's a better one for one. It's like, okay, yeah, when the establishment of Germany was acting up, yes, that did draw a lot of ire to people that would conflate that with the group as a whole. And the same thing applies to Jews, people when you have these Shmuley characters, Israel, killing something like over 30,000 people, almost half of those are children. It's like, it makes sense. People are gonna be like, what the fuck are the Jews doing?
Well, and I mean, I even saw that recent, and you can, how many different areas can you point to where there's this extraordinary overrepresentation that so many people, I mean, if you have no frame of reference whatsoever, you just came onto the scene and all of a sudden someone told you that the vast majority of Congress, right, hold dual loyalty to one nation, and that nation happens to be Israel, one of the smallest groups of people that exist on earth. And yet they're overrepresented to this extent in all these different parliaments, and it's just, it's amazing because, and I just saw that all 17 of AIPAC's candidates won their elections. Of course they did. And what did they get around the nuclear proliferation treaty? That as far as how they're still sending, all this aid to Israel is and they're actually a nuclear armed power, but because America hasn't ever recognized that fact, then we can still send all this ridiculous foreign aid and how many bombs are we sending to Israel? It's over like, what did I see? I think Dave DeCamp just did an article on this saying that 99% of Israel's military, all of their bombs, all of their munitions have been supplied by like 69% by the United States and the remaining percentage by Germany, basically. And so it's just like, man, and yet we can still, what did they just, the UN Security Council, they just ruled, right? And the United States, they didn't veto this ruling, right? Like it, what did they do instead? They abstained. And they abstained on Israel's behalf, yet that wasn't enough for Netanyahu. He's still going to threaten the United States. And, you know what I mean?
I mean, to be fair, I actually think I'm surprised by that development, honestly. Like,
me too.
So I kind of get in a certain sense why BB's upset. I mean, obviously I don't agree with him, but from his perspective, where he's coming from and how we've acted in the past, I get how he's like, what the fuck?
Right.
So like, what is going on here? Like, but I totally get that. Like, even if they did abstain on their side, the fact that they wouldn't veto it, because that is how it typically works. We have veto power, and anytime there's any motion against Israel, we usually toss it out, and that's how they get away with everything, essentially. And they have carte blanche to do all this sort of shit.
And we really are a permanent war state. Like, how many people are aware that we're in the midst of bombing Somalia, right? I mean, like Yemen, Iraq, Syria. How many Americans are aware that we're currently bombing these foreign countries, as well as while we're simultaneously sending thousands of bombs to Tel Aviv, right? It's just like, but we can still claim, at least our government overlords can claim to the public, right, that they're not involved in this war. And you know what I mean? It's just like absolutely ridiculous. I mean, it wouldn't be happening if it weren't for the United States foreign aid to Israel. There's no way it would be happening. And then, I mean, Lindsey Graham claims it's a religious war, right? And points to the Al-Aqsa Mosque as the key factor in all of this. But I mean, dude, the Al-Aqsa Mosque is the third holiest site in Islam, and there's a lot more Muslims than Christians. I'm just putting it out there. And I don't understand. I guess when you read the interpretation of the covenant of Abraham, as far as the modern Christian Zionist interpretation of the scripture, I mean, people need to understand that the Bible in its current form has been manipulated in many ways. Now, I'm no biblical scholar or expert, but I'm just saying that you can point to so many different times throughout history where some pope decided that he didn't want any references to reincarnation in the scripture any longer and had it removed. I mean, this has actually occurred throughout history, and people act as if this is untainted. There's right, like no external effect has potentially co-opted this divine book. And I understand. I'm not attempting to offend anyone who believes in God.
Well, most people, particularly Christians, they immediately assume, and I did for the longest time, that Judaism is just the Old Testament, and just like Like, but no, it's
Why
way
don't you
more
tell them about the
complicated than that.
Talmud, Jose?
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, yeah, and I don't even know. I'm not even making any sort of claim whatsoever to have some sort of deep knowledge of
right.
Judaism. I like to like joke around about the Talmud and like whatever and like the goy, stupid goy or whatever shit like that. But I don't normally like go big brain because I'm not coming from any sort of place of knowledge. I've looked into a little bit, but it's all just out of context quotes. I will say those out of context quotes are like, holy fuck. But like, I mean, you probably could say the same shit about a lot of stuff in the Bible. Oh, but I mean, I'm not religious. But then again, I'm sure you could say that about all sorts of things you've said or I've said. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I haven't read the entire Talmud or all that shit. But at the same time, I'm just kind of making the point I don't normally go there. Like, and
Right.
it's not that. It's just because I don't know enough. But I think that right there is kind of the major flaw where people just immediately assume, oh, other religion. And I'm not even necessarily saying it's necessarily bad. But, you know, because there's probably so many different denominations, I'm sure there's people that may interpret it in certain ways that
No doubt.
I find
Yeah.
to be okay or
Right.
whatever, you know, maybe. I don't fucking know. And then
Well,
there's also
and I mean-
probably sects of it that I'm like, whoa, what the fuck? Like the
In
Sabbateans
the
or whatever.
Schofield Study Bible.
Yeah.
I thought the Schofield Study Bible and just the history of that, and by the way, when it was originally published was in 1909, which perfectly aligned with the first World Zionist Congress of 1897, which then, by the way, when the first appearance of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion was in like 1902. And so all of this is happening within a few years of each other. And right after this World Zionist Congress, the first World Zionist Congress, and all of a sudden there's a Schofield Study Bible that seems to have made millions of American evangelicals into Christian Zionists. I mean, no doubt about it. I mean, they even in the notes, and it's attached to the King James Version as far as the Schofield Study Bible is concerned, and they released like even in like as late as 1989, I think they released another version that even went as far as to say that a quote in it was, "For a nation to commit the sin of anti-Semitism brings inevitable judgment," right? And so I think it's important that people understand that I'm not denying that at least a version of the scripture has been maintained over time that is extremely valuable, and its interpretations are in many ways very pure. And again, I'm not attempting to convert anyone otherwise to any other perspective, but I do think it's very important to at least trace back a history to know enough to know that there has been significant manipulation to the point to where, I mean, millions of induced generations of American evangelicals believe that God demands their uncritical support for the modern state of Israel, you know? And I mean, that's, man,
Andrew Klavan, I think, just did some whole tirade about this, essentially doing some, and you know what? I vaguely recall this stuff where, you know, people would make the allude to, you know, Jews being the chosen people, which it does say that in the Bible, but you know, whatever, you know, but then the problem is there becomes multiple interpretations, you know, of people. You know, people make, what does Israel mean? And this is even a debate within, you know, Judaism, where like a lot of the there are a lot of anti-Zionist Jews who will make the claim that Israel is more the people than it is a place. And that's, and a lot of Christians will make the same claim as well. And a lot of people will make, you know, say when it comes to chosen people, the chosen ones, that they make, there's different, you know, interpretations of what that means. Like some people will make some of the more Zionist ones, which it seems like Klavan was almost insinuating that, like, you know, if you're a Jew, essentially you're a chosen one or whatever. And I don't know if that implies that you're somehow like not, you don't have to be Christian or something. I don't fucking know. Once you get into the biblical stuff, there's always a bajillion different fucking interpretations when it comes to that stuff. So it's like, I don't know. I don't even like arguing that stuff, even if you are religious. It's like, because you're dealing with, so many people, different interpretations. Like, I remember, I may be wrong on this, but I recall, because I grew up religious. I went to Christian school all through, elementary school and high school. And I vaguely recall that there was one, I don't know if it was a pastor or who, but someone made the claim that essentially what would happen, on Judgment Day or whatever, or in the end times, is that, obviously all the Christians would go up. And then I think the idea was that, like, Jews would get some sort of, like, almost like an extra chance. Is essentially, like, was that was their way to, like, somehow thread the needle of what the chosen.
I know there's a certain number. There's a certain number of Jews that would be allowed into heaven as far as the rapture, when it ensues. But again, I'm not condemning the scripture when I'm speaking on this. I do believe that there is a vast misinterpretation when it comes to people believing that basically this genocide must take place as sort of in order to usher in, right, the end times. And so it has a lot to do with the Al-Aqsa Mosque and how it ties into Christianity as well. And so it's just a real issue, because it always boils down to the interpretation of the covenant of Abraham and Ishmael and all of that. And I much prefer to mostly focus on clearly what we can prove, right? Which for me is the military conflicts that are unnecessary and clearly immoral, and to denounce them at every opportunity. But I most certainly don't believe that the proper interpretation, right, is that we are now going to be at war with with Ishmael's nation of, right, when he's banished and out into the desert. And it's honestly just sad and unfortunate. And I see its impact on my own family and how they are interpreting this modern conflict. Right. And people don't seem to realize that, like the Zionists were considering, like, the African nation of Uganda, at first, when they were considering places to form the modern state of Israel. And so that was always a big conflict that I had in the scripture, was that I was under the impression that the only way that the rapture could ensue, right, and that the end times could take place is when apparently Jesus came back to reform the state of Israel himself, right? And so I just didn't understand, like, how any Christians could get behind the reformation of the state of Israel outside of that context, right? But I guess the idea is that that basically through external forces, through, like, this could manifest itself, but and still be in the divine prophecy, as far as people, I think the perspective is concerned. But once again, it's even forbidden by Orthodox Jews, right, to apparently have these targeted, sustained invasions of this holy site, and so, I mean, even Orthodox Jews like require more. Like, it's just, honestly, that once again, you get into the weeds with this, and you better have done a lot of reading and have it at your disposal. But honestly, man, I did see Max Blumenthal the other day give a talk at this forum where he was basically heckled, right? And he he was asked, why did the Palestinians initiate this war with their vicious attack on the Israelis on October 7th? And I loved how he responded, because he just refused to accept that, and basically repeated that they didn't, and that this war has been going on for 75 years, that Israel initiated it in 1948 by ethnically cleansing 750,000 people. And then he quotes the first prime minister of Israel, David Ben-Gurion, who said in 1937, "We must expel Arabs and take their places. And if we have to use force, not to dispossess the Arabs of the Negev and the Transjordan, but to guarantee our own right to settle in those places, then we have force at our disposal." And so they proceeded to do this. And over 80% of the people in Gaza are refugees, right? Many of them are from a place called Al-Majd al-Asqalon in what is now southern Israel, in a city called Ashkelon. And these people were dragged and driven from their homes and placed in barbed wire prison camps, and then dumped in trucks in 1950 into the Gaza Strip, where they would be permanently warehoused. Then Israel proceeded to move Arab Jewish refugees and Russians into Ashkelon to prevent them from ever coming back, while passing laws to prevent Palestinians from being able to return to their homes. 750,000 Palestinians were ethnically cleansed. For 18 years, the remaining Palestinians, 100,000, were internally displaced inside Israel, and the remaining were put under military occupation until 1966. And in 67, Israel violently initiated a war where it finally occupies Gaza, the West Bank, the Sinai Peninsula, the Golan Heights, and East Jerusalem, and then invades Lebanon in 1982, attacking Palestinian refugees there. And that was Menachem Begin, who was, right, a member of the Irgun and the Stern Gang, and became a prime minister actually later on as well. And they said that he lost his mind when he invaded Lebanon, basically. But his number one concern when he was choosing his replacement, when he stepped down, was that they would never give back 1 inch of the land to the Palestinians, right? I mean, honestly, we really have to consider that we're past the point for a two-state solution. I don't see it happening. I mean, I'm very concerned that this pier or makeshift port or whatever is actually some sort of way to deport Palestinians, and settle this once and for all, which to me seems to be the process of extermination. And we're going to look back at this, man. And the word genocide will always be in our minds. Like there's absolutely no way that anybody could look at this as anything other than that, right? There's no way.
I mean, you can call it ethnic cleansing, but really, what is that? Just genocide?
It's genocide.
Light? Yeah, I mean, like, I don't fucking know. I mean, I'm like torn on the usage of the word genocide, because it implies that, like, if you're part of a group, that it almost makes it worse. I mean, it's mass murder, either way. Like, but yeah, there's one thing that I wanted to bring up. I mean, maybe this is a little bit silly, but I just was thinking about this as you mentioned it, and there's a few other things. I guess this ties into a few things like bending the knee, and you also, one of the Hamas points you brought up about, or not the Hamas, but the point of them, that I guess Israel kind of started this in a certain sense in the beginning. Right. This is a weird little anecdote, but I thought it was interesting. There's this guy, and I'll name him. I don't give a shit. Glenn the Golden, some parapolitics dude, like a left-winger guy on Twitter. And I don't remember even why I blocked him in the first place. I'm assuming he did this. But, when I was, really covering all that 764 stuff, and I'll probably cover that again here soon. There's just been a lot of arrests piling up, and I just, but it was nothing that was like made sense to do a whole podcast on. But there have been a lot of arrests popping off, just so you guys know. But was this one guy who that guy Glenn the Golden, who immediately started running around during that time and calling, and essentially wasn't really necessarily going at me, but was going at BX, but then using me, and then I believe actually, Jolyon Klebold or Tim Tuttle was using also him, and essentially saying that we were Holocaust deniers, and then essentially accusing her by association. Which I don't know. I guess depending on how you want to. This goes back to kind of the Jewish word tricks we're kind of talking about earlier. Right. I guess sure, maybe depending on how you define it. Yes, maybe you could consider me one. I don't consider myself a Holocaust denier. I think a Holocaust of some sort happened. I mean, maybe we can quibble about the numbers. I will tell you like what the official narrative. And by when I say official narrative, I mean. The Shmulis of the world that go around talking about how they turn them to soap and candles or whatever the fuck. Yeah, no, I don't believe some of that shit. But yeah, I think a lot of fucking people died. At least probably in the millions. Whether you want to say it was 3, 4, 5, 6, a lot of people died. It was bad. But yes, I also do think it's a little bit more. There's a lot more to the story. I know. And when I say official narrative, it's not even necessarily official narrative. I just mean what people colloquially think of when they think of it, and people who haven't looked into it all. A lot of people immediately think World War II, and they're like, "Oh yeah, it's when the Holocaust happened, and we had to go to war because of the Holocaust." And it's like, well, that's not at all what happened. But that's what most people who just went to high school history and never really looked into it much. That's what they think of. But essentially, to get to the point, this guy. He was going around doing that, which is weird because it was at a time where, BX was talking to a lot of these like 764 victims and, so it kind of was driving a wedge between her and those people, and just recently, the Stop Anti-Semitism, account doxed him. And then it was also amplified by the libs of TikTok or whatever. And what it was for, ironically, was for anti-Semitism. And they took some few out of context tweets of his. And I think this kind of ties into the bending the knee thing and just the irony of like the lefties and how they work. And they got him for some tweet, I think a couple, they were out of context, clearly. One was something to do with Hamas fighting back or some bullshit, essentially making the point that, like, how are we surprised when this happens when that has been happening?
Exactly.
And that makes sense. I kind of agree with the point he was making. And once again, it was out of context. I don't know the larger argument he was making and whoever he was replying to or whatever. Yes, out of context, you could construe that as him saying that he supports it. But I didn't see that as a support thing, like I was saying I support Hamas or whatever. I think it was more just kind of like, when you have an oppressed people and there's some sort of violent group in that area that is fighting against, or at least perceived to fight against the oppressors. Yeah, like, no shit. Like, these people that you're bombing are going to then get with these people and be like, what can I do to help? Because fuck these people. So, like, it totally makes sense. And that doesn't mean I agree that you support that group no more than you support the other group. But, like, so I thought that was a perfectly fair point, but I found that to be an anecdote that applied to a lot of different points we made here today. So whatever, it was worth bringing up. I just found it ironic. And then also, I guess it kind of ties into the concept of bending the knee because to some extent, because he accepted this paradigm, I would assume, I mean, not necessarily saying that's why he got targeted, but I'm saying, I think it's almost like you sense blood. And that was kind of the point that I was making with Rabbi Shmuley earlier with him going after Shapiro on the Daily Wire. Still, it's like once you bend the knee a little bit, once you've shown that you accept that framing, it's like, oh, well, then we can use this framing against you. And, like, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm sure, like, the libs of TikTok or the Stop Anti-Semitism could probably do the same damn thing to me. But I have a feeling that it's probably slightly less likely. Because, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like it's like they find the people that it's like it just tends to be that way. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure to some extent it just makes it a little more likely, I think. I just think there's something to that concept of once you accept that framing, once you're sitting here arguing like, well, no, I'm not an anti-Semite because, well, and you're like, just like you're just arguing semantics because then now you're getting to like, well, how do you define anti-Semite? Well, I define it this way, and you're like, oh, whatever, I don't fucking care. If you have some words you can call me, like, I don't give a shit. Do you have an argument other than I'm a meanie? And like, because who gives a shit otherwise? But all right, I want to play this last clip, and then after that we'll probably swap over to the call-in section. But this is about 3.5 minutes long, but I think it's worth it. This was I clipped this from the essentially her finishing segment on her last episode, and I immediately was like, when this happened, this is big. And I think maybe people will see what I mean. Obviously, after the fact, when he got fired, when that happened, I was immediately like, I wasn't like I called it, but it was like I knew something big was happening. This felt like Candace dropping her dick on the table. This felt like a dropping of gauntlet. And also, this did tie into, I saw it became so transparent, this whole Christ is King shit. This is, in my opinion, where it came from. I know everybody is pointing to this, talking about Fuentes did it or whatever. Sure. Okay. Yeah. Fuentes said it. There's some shit. Who gives a fuck? I really think this is where it came from. And I think maybe to some extent the Fuentes thing tied into it. But I think you guys might see what I'm getting at here. I thought this was very interesting. And, with the Crisis King thing, I don't know if you guys noticed, the day before they went to the Crisis King thing, they were setting up the argument that anti-Semite, that to essentially, I don't know, I'll look it up in a second. I forget exactly, but they were essentially implying that, what was it? That if you, I don't know, I forget but they essentially built the argument the day before, essentially, that to get to the Crisis King thing is bad. I'll
Dude, before you play this,
yeah.
I have to piss. It's an emergency.
Oh, go for it. You got plenty of time.
I'll be right back, honestly. Yeah. Appreciate you, bro.
Here you guys.
I can't tell you guys how wrong this is. It is so wrong that every fiber of my being now wants to expose this. I want to invite each and every journalist that is going to continue to engage with me in this way onto my show. So Isaac Shore, take this as a public invite for you to come down to sit with me and to explain to everybody why you really believed that I think Jews drink Christian blood. You wrote that article because you really believed it. You're actually a good guy. I'm sure you are. I'm going to sit here quietly. I'm going to allow you to explain yourself, why you have written so many articles about me and why you believe that I have to be fired. Did you actually believe, as you've written in past articles, that people like me and Tucker Carlson were anti-Semites? Further to that note, further to me believing that the solution to all of this is simply daylight being the best of disinfectants, I have publicly offered to Rabbi Barclay, who wants me to watch the IDF footage, that not only will I watch the footage, but I am challenging him to use his contacts to also get me a trip to Israel and Gaza. Allow me to be a reporter on the ground. People feel like they're being propagandized about the matter one way or the other. So why not send somebody who I think I've earned the trust of the American public. I'm not someone that will ever be bought and paid for. I'm not someone that will ever say things that I know to be untrue. Why not allow me to go? I'll talk to IDF shoulders, I'll talk to Netanyahu, but I also want to speak to people that are impacted by this in Gaza. I want to see what's going on in Gaza. Why not allow someone like me to go there? And I've offered that I will bring other journalists that I think are middle of the line, not one way or the other, simply reporting on the matters and similarly having to endure a bunch of threats and a bunch of smears. But like my friend, who's just a commentator, Dave Smith, a Jewish person who is now being told that he's a self-hating Jew because he won't get in line and, I don't know, deliver the AIPAC talking points. People have a right to know what is going on, especially when it is so significant that you're willing to take out people for not saying the right thing. So my offer stands. Anybody who wants to write an article or smear me or libel me, you are invited to this show. Hopefully, they'll take up my offer. Hopefully, in a few weeks, I will be out to Israel and I will be out to Gaza, and I will be able to report to you guys what it is that I actually see. But I also want to say this because it's so important. I am Team God. Okay? I'm Team God. I do not fear the media. I do not fear journalists. I do not fear AIPAC. I don't fear Big Pharma. What I actually fear is God. I think that one day we are all going to have to account for the things that we have done and the things that we have said. And I want to make sure that I am not a person that is parroting lies. Fear of losing your job, encouraging some people to spit out lies, I don't think that works in the end. Right? I think you got to check your priorities. And so With that said, I want to thank everybody who has been on this journey with me, people that have supported me. I especially want to thank all of the Jewish people that have been in the comments saying how outraged they are. And I know that it is especially difficult for you guys right now because you are being smeared, you know? I mean, all
right, that's basically all of it. The point I was trying to make, I found the point I was making because I made a tweet about it. On that very day that, like, I believe it was either day or the day after this or the following day, that's when I started seeing a lot of big conservative Inc. Type things like Babylon Bee people, Daily Wire people, associated type people that were essentially implying that to hate Judaism is to hate Christianity. Which, I mean, to be clear, these are both ideologies. If you hate, I don't think it's necessarily wrong. I guess maybe hate might be the wrong way to put it. But if you hate an ideology, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, depending on the ideology or religion or whatever. But essentially the point being is hating Judaism doesn't necessarily mean you hate Christianity. And then I found it. Essentially, the point I was getting at is these people are making that hatred of Judaism equals hatred of Christianity. And then also I found it interesting that these are a lot of the same people who will conflate criticism of Israel with hatred of Jews. So essentially this is like this almost this logical trick they're trying to play where essentially you get from criticism of Israel to hatred of Christianity. So that's how they kind of looped that around. And then the following day, that's when we got the Christ is King shit, which that really popped off, where they go, oh, Christ is King is just like fucking saying Black Lives Matter or some dumb bullshit.
Exactly.
Yes. And so that is, so it's like, to me, I was like, who's giving out marching orders? Because that's what it felt like to me. Because it was this, one after the other, and it was almost like they were building off of each other, like kind of logically from one to the other, trying to make this case. And then that way they get to the following day go, oh, Christ is King is bad, and then they don't have to uphold that logic with other logic because you already got from one to the other to the other to the other. Just kind of boop 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 boop. So it's like built off of previous arguments they made. They're 12 arguments back at that point. You know what I mean? So if you're trying to argue like, what do you mean Christ is King? And they're essentially referring to previous arguments and without even mentioning it essentially. So this is a logical trick they have to do. I mean, I made a tweet and then I literally put that last 30 seconds of that clip where she's going on about God. Because that's I genuinely think that's kind of the impetus there. They're running cover like, oh shit. Like she kind of invoked God here. I mean, I don't know if Europeans, I don't know if you caught all of that. I think you probably caught the important parts.
Yeah,
but
I could hear it still.
Yeah, so I don't know if you have any final thoughts on that before we swap over to Colin. I think Jeffrey B in the chat might want to talk to you.
She touched the third rail, man.
Yeah, so you'll have your opportunity. If we bring it up, I would suggest with Jeffrey, I'm not going to bring up any of your chats, but if you want to call in, you're welcome to. The only reason I'm not going to bring up your chats is because you're kind of like, I don't know.
I saw them.
Yeah, I mean, we saw them.
I was just like, yeah.
It's just it would be hard to do in to argue whatever he wants to argue in a back and forth with a chat. So if he wants to call in, he's welcome to call in. We'll go into that.
And just so he knows, I was not condemning the scripture and, like that. That's not my perspective at all. I was just trying to make the claim that clearly there's been I'm just saying that popes have, over the course of history, no doubt they've had an effect on the overall scripture that's been released to the public, and as far as the modern day interpretation. And so my main point, though, was only to say that there is a deliberate conflation with an actual. There was the Zionist project, honestly. They sought to conflate the idea of Christianity in the West, right? Just in general, they wanted to conflate that to the Zionist project as far as we need a weapon and a tool of convenience that will usher in this ideological perspective to the West, which will then dominate this massive sect of society that have a huge impact on the overall consequence of where we end up, especially in the world's largest empire. And so my only point is just that Zionism has explicitly and specifically targeted Christianity in the West to attempt to undermine it and conflate it to Zionist principles. And so therefore you have the Christian Zionist. And so that is my number one issue. I think, again, it's a conflation. It's a misinterpretation. It's not a divine prophecy to commit genocide on any group of people using a nation state. Like it's just, no God that I believe in would actually facilitate a genocide, in my opinion. So if that is your interpretation, which I highly doubt that it is, then yeah, I mean, I understand why you would be upset with what I'm saying, but honestly, I really do believe it's just been a conflationary. I think they really are attempting to subdue a massive group of individuals in this country that do have good intentions, right? And they want. So I think that people need to know that there have been deliberate efforts that are traced back to, like, Samuel Untermyer, who was a devout Zionist, right? And he allegedly used Cyrus Scofield, who created the Scofield Study Bible in 1909 and published it then. He basically used this guy and this, like I said, this conflationary movement as a part of the Zionist project. And he basically wanted Scofield's theology to help get fundamentalist Christians to back the international interests of the Zionist pet project and the Zionist movement. And so that's really, like, my number one concern, is that Zionism, right? Zionism is a sadistic and radical political ideology, right? And they will use whatever methods, necessary, and so I really wish that people would look into the formation of the Zionist movement and the Zionist project and the World Zionist Congress and Theodore Herzl and all the different prime ministers, like of Israel. I mean, how many can we point to where, I mean, even Netanyahu himself basically brags that they're exploiting Christians in the West. And so, I mean, I think it's a sad misinterpretation that leads people to, unfortunately, usher in this. I mean, it seems like a totalitarian agenda, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not held by any sort of constraint when it comes to international borders, right? And so, again, it's like, I mean, when you realize that the mentality we're up against is people like Arnon Safar, who helped construct the siege in 2005, right? And he's a government consultant for Israel. I mean, and he legitimately says we must kill and kill all day, every day, right? That's the mentality we're up against. And, I mean, it's a tactic they call mowing the lawn, right? And I mean, what kind of perspective is that, right? Yeah. Like, that is so sickening to me. And all I can say is that I'm so tired of seeing blown up children on my timeline, brother. Like, my God, man. I mean, it's just so fucking sad. But I mean, so how do you expect these people to just play along, right? To just go along with, while they're cut off from the entire rest of the world, right? So, and I mean, the so-called disengagement that took place between 2005 and 2007, where 9,000 illegal settlers were removed from Gaza in order to give the Israeli military freedom of operation. It only led to massive military operations and bombing campaigns. I mean, all-out siege, right? with the Israeli government even controlling the amount of calories that each resident in Gaza was entitled to under the siege, right? And that's when it began manipulating the water and electricity flow.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It sounds like an occupation to me,
Yeah.
right?
Well, all right, we're already at like an hour 10, so let's transition into the call in real quick. I'm gonna do my ad read. I got Fox and Sons coffee. Any of you guys been paying attention? I've actually been drinking the coffee throughout today. I got staying up a little bit later than normal, so I'm able to drink a little bit of coffee today to keep me up. You get 15% off your order, $30 or more using Jose. It's www.foxandsons.com. This is good stuff, and guy isn't just an advertiser. He's been a supporter for a long time, helping out people like me, helping out people like Lines of Liberty. A lot of people, kind of spitting this type of shit. He started this out to kind of honor his times with his dad and pass on the lessons he learned from him on to his kids. Stuff like entrepreneurship. Beans are, high quality stuff, fresh, sourced from small family farms. Use the code Jose. Let them know I sent you. This is good stuff. I tell you all the time, I drink this stuff black. I'm usually the kind of guy who likes to put a little cream in it, but this is delicious shit. All right, guys, we're going to open up the phone lines. Here we go, 941-281-5857. You guys can call that if you want to, call in. I did real quick. I kind of wanted to touch on, the previous conversation. I noticed today, I don't know if you saw Not Gay Jared from Crowder today put out a tweet. Yeah, he put this whole video kind of, he never said Crowder, but he's heavily alluding to kind of being almost abused, and he kind of legally abused, and then also kind of making the point that there was a lot of shit going on there, a lot of fucked up stuff. And I tend to, think that's probably true. But the point I got out of that, and he I guess he's, getting people's help and stuff, and trying to get, financial support. And he's, talking about making countersuits against Crowder and, possibly releasing information, which, that could be a bombshell of its own. So the point I got out of that is that Conservative Inc. looks like it's in shambles, personally. Those are like the two pillars, in my opinion. You have Ben Shapiro being the big one, then I guess you have Crowder kind of following it, and then I don't know, maybe after that, maybe a Babylon Bee, but even that's in a different way. Because they've kind of they've been kind of hanging out, they've been kind of following the line with the tribe. I just think there's something to that Conservative Inc. is in shambles. I think that spells out something for the future here. What that means, and I think they may not be able to hold on to that captive Christian audience or just audience in general, anymore. Oh fuck, I messed up the layout. Here we go. I was trying to bring up the call-in thing. But yeah, I found that kind of telling. And I think between the Candace thing with Shapiro, I know someone put out some tweet today that were talking about that he has Shapiro has something like 7 million subscribers, in his most recent podcast after being out for over an hour only had 3.5 or fucking views, 3.5k views. So that's not much for an account of that size. So I think we're looking at a new dawn. We're gonna have other names that kind of take their place. I think this establishment game is not going to work out well in the long run, or hasn't. So I think these guys who are kind of essentially playing establishment, like as Sam Tripoli likes to play it, safe, dangerous. I think the Overton window has shifted, and now the safe, dangerous is in a different spot. I think the safe, dangerous is used to be people like Tim Pool. Actually,
what's your perspective on
Tim Pool, man? I don't know. I've been on the show a couple times.
Right.
I have almost no rapport with him. So, because how it works, you show up there, you get there about, I don't know, an hour. You get there 2 hours early. Usually it's both times I get there 2 hours early. You kind of hang out with the crew downstairs and stuff, or some of the people, whoever comes in and out. And you hang out there for about an hour. Then you go upstairs for about an hour before the show. And then, at that point, he's on his computer. He's kind of making small talk, going through stories. He's not really talking with you per se. He's not like not talking with you either. He's more or less just kind of, because you got to think the social dynamic you're walking into. You are you're essentially the FNG, the fucking new guy. That's how it is at any time. It's like it's almost like you came to a new school, you joined the fucking football team or whatever, and you're the new guy. Like, yeah, maybe you have a lot of skill, maybe you don't, but like they don't fucking know that. You're the new guy. So that's the vibe you get until maybe you've been there a while or whatever. But yes, so I have like almost no rapport. I've spent a total of like fucking 4 hours with the guy podcasting.
Right.
So like, and that's different than having like a, personal conversation or something.
Most definitely. Yeah.
So like, that's the level of rapport we have. I don't know, obviously the first time, the second time there was a differing level of rapport. I felt a little bit more friendly with him the second time, but I couldn't tell you a damn thing about him. Like, aside from vibes, but I don't know. It's hard to get a read on the guy.
Right.
Probably of the people there, he's probably the hardest person to get a read on.
Yeah, I always loved Luke.
Yeah.
I've been following him for forever, but yeah, I don't know. Tim just he feels like some sort of gatekeeper, and I don't mean to put him in that context. Like I
mean, I don't know if it's intentional or not, but I know what you mean. Like, because the point I was getting at is he used to be the. I guess maybe this is a bad example. I would say Shapiro and Crowder used to be the safe dangerous. And then like Tim Pool used to be more in the more into the dangerous, but still sort of in safe dangerous.
Right.
And then now I think we've gotten to where I don't know, like say for example, I brought my buddy Clint earlier. Now he's safe dangerous. And like we even tease him for that, saying that you listen to his views, they're pretty extreme. Like, especially if you compare it to 5-10 years ago, they're pretty extreme. But I genuinely feel like that he has become safe dangerous. Like he's the boring guy in the room when you're with like a bunch of people. You know what I mean? And we've teased him about that on like Tower Gang, that like, hey, of us, you're the safe dangerous. You're the fucking. You're like, oh, look at this fucking faggot. So like that's where we're at now. So like I think that's interesting because with the shift now, that makes that opens up a lot of space for other people like me and you, others, to kind of fill the void of what is kind of like becoming acceptable essentially, or can kind of move, if you will. So yeah, I think that's going to be, I think in the future that's what we're going to be working with. All right, we're going to start going through the chats. If you want to work from the bottom up, I'll work from top down and kind of, we'll bring up whatever we find to be interesting, worth bringing up to. But we have the calls. You guys can call in at any time. Keep in mind, I have to mute myself to talk to you, and I'll bring you up when I can. So, and I'm kind of a retard. So, and you can't talk to, you can't like, Austin can hear you, but you guys can't have like a back and forth. You can't hear him. So that is the deal here. Let me see.
I liked what Nicholas said about the Balfour Declaration, said to exist within Palestine, not taking it over. Oh yeah. And by the way, Diddy on the run, huh? We got.
Oh yeah, we didn't even bring up Diddy. Yeah,
we didn't even bring it up.
Yeah, Diddy's on the run, all OJ style. Yeah.
That's so crazy, man.
Yeah.
But who knows?
Yeah.
Well, I did see that. Didn't TMZ locate him though at one point at an airport? So
something like that. But even then, I heard that was like I don't fucking know. I mean, yeah, I haven't really been following the on the ground stuff.
I haven't
stuff
either.
That just
really
pops in, but either way, I'm kind of like, whoa. I do think he's going to end up being the fall guy. But
no doubt.
Yeah. But
it's exactly like. Yeah. I mean, not exactly, because this is clearly much different with the Hollywood connection, but it just reminds me of Mark Dutroux and Epstein, just so similar, because inevitably they're always just the scapegoat and labeled as the number one perpetrator, right? And given much too much credit for their actions. But I did like what Nicholas said about the Balfour Declaration, because people don't seem to understand the history of this conflict, like whatsoever. Right. And I mean, we all know that colonialization and nation building was clearly the status quo during this time in the late 1800s. And I mean, that's why you had like Uganda was even on the table, because it was already just a colony of the British at this time, right? And I mean, we all know how Guyana has been affected, and to this very day, I mean, most of these nations are just complete puppets of the empire to one extent or to one degree or another, and so it's just, but I do think that the primary goal from 1897 to 1948 of the Zionist movement was so obvious to establish the basis for a Jewish homeland in Palestine. That became the clear goal. And so then they set out to consolidate that. I mean, that was obviously what they were going to do. And so I just think that people should understand how this all took place. And the claim is that this is all sort of a reaction, right, to the anti-Jewish pogroms, right, and in the Russian Empire. But I mean, in 1884 and like to 1897, the world's first Zionist Congress was organized by Theodor Herzl, right? And he was the supreme organ of the Zionist organization and its legislative authority. Yeah, and an atheist. Yeah, exactly. It's ridiculous, man.
Yeah.
And so the Sixth World Zionist Congress in Basel, Switzerland in 1903, Theodor Herzl, this is when he presented the Uganda scheme, right? And proposed to apparently this had been proposed to Theodor Herzl by Joseph Chamberlain, who was the colonial secretary in Balfour's cabinet. And this was when basically they proposed this creation of a Jewish homeland in a portion of the British colony in East Africa. And Arthur Balfour, Lord Balfour, was a British statesman, and he was even the prime minister of the UK from like 1902 to 1905. And Zionist leader Chaim Weizmann, later president of the World Zionist Organization and first president of Israel, moved from Switzerland to the UK in 1904 and met Arthur Balfour in a session arranged by Charles Dreyfus, his Jewish constituency representative. And according to the book, Balfour and Weizmann, The Zionist, the Zealot, and the Emergence of Israel, by January 1914, Weizmann first met Baron Edmund de Rothschild, a member of the French branch of the Rothschild family, and a leading proponent of the Zionist movement. And the Baron was not part of the World Zionist Organization, but he had funded the Jewish agricultural colonies of the First Aliyah and transferred them to the Jewish Colonization Association in 1899. So it was just being set up perfectly. Like if you trace this back, you can follow exactly how the modern state of Israel was formed through Zionism, through the Zionist project.
Yeah.
So the foundation of the modern state of Israel is through the ideological perspective of the Zionist project. So there's no way around it.
Yeah, it's one of those things that like they've done a good job at their propaganda, because there's so many layers. Like you have to keep peeling back. Like they always want to focus on this thing, because obviously like with this thing, they want to focus on October 7th being the beginning of history, and then from there then you get to if you can peel it back to 1967 or 1948, right. And then or you can even go to the when they're settling, and then even then you're like, well, the pogroms, and you're like. And each one of those things has their more nuance, and the further you get back in time, the more uncertainty there is, because that's the way history works. Like what really was going on. So the further you get back there, the further the less you know. So obviously, once you get back to like pogroms, that's when people are like, I don't know, we'll just take their word for it. Because, like, who the fuck's going to, once you've done a deep dive on the current situation, and then once you go, then you have to do a deep dive on what the fuck, how it started. And then you have to go, then you're like, well, no, fuck, well, not what? Now I got to dig into pogroms? And you just get to the point where you're like, it just keeps fucking going. And you're like, I'm not even saying that, like, there wasn't truth to pogroms or whatever. I'm just saying that it's like, one of those, to get a grip on it, it's fucking hard. So
it is.
I understand why people are that. I want to respect my our Rumble chat real quick, because especially as much as we've been talking about the Jays this episode, I wouldn't be surprised if it gets nuked. So always keep in mind we are on Rumble. So our buddy Namrock says, "Can't wait till Tower Gang is safe, dangerous." Yes, that's when liberty will be achieved.
Oh my god!
So then we have a good little joke. Did he or did he not?
Oh my god! Stupid, dude.
But I do have on the ship thing. Nicholas said the ship left 40 minutes before, made a perfect 180 turn, and lost power perfectly timed to shear off the 60-degree wide column in 1.5 mile long bridge. Bridge collapses at free fall speed into its own foot.
Yeah.
You know what? You convinced me it was the CIA. All right.
Right.
Yeah, no, that sounds whack. I don't know what to make of that. I did think it was kind of wild that, like, people like Tate immediately were like, oh, it's fucking, like what was it, like 2 hours after they were
Black Swan event.
Yeah, like, okay, maybe. I'm not saying you're wrong, but, like, okay, that's quite the claim.
Yeah, definitely.
So, yeah,
man, seeing those, at least it looked like you could see some of those cars actually plunging into the water. That's crazy. Oh, I forgot to mention Alex Jones, man. I just thought it was so crazy that
on the point of the tide is turning. Yep.
Exactly. Yeah. Like that really blew my mind, because that's always been his number one criticism is shill for Israel, right? So I did find it interesting that he would even use the term genocide when in reference to the viral drone attack, right, on those Palestinians, which, I mean, the drone comes back, finishes off the job when the guy's crawling away. Like it's heinous, man, but
yeah,
at least there is some sort of shift that I'm seeing, whether it's, I don't know, orchestrated or not, I'm not sure, but who knows? But I've mentioned more than once the protocols of the Elders of Zion, only because when I found out about this, and again, it's always dismissed as like the ultimate anti-Semitic text. They call it a hoax of hate, right? And they claim that it's a forgery, that's like a literary forgery, and that it's been entirely debunked, right? But it's very interesting because of the timing. And also, if you read any of it, which I will disclose, I haven't read all of it, so I need to actually finish it at some point. But you read it and it all reads very similar. It's pretty extraordinary. I mean, obviously, I mean, even Hitler talked about it in Mein Kampf, which I thought was what his quote about this was pretty revealing. But also, this became the sort of curriculum for the Hitler Youth, was tied to this type of the protocols of the Elders of Zion, which basically first appeared in 1902. And like I said, was then deemed a hoax of hate by 1921. But it was allegedly traced back by the London Times to Russian anti-Semites, right? And that's when they pronounced it a forgery, according to Philip Graves, who was a reporter for the Times in London, but was based in Constantinople. And he allegedly debunked this Zionist manifesto in August of 1921, claiming it was, like I said, a literary forgery and plagiarism from the work of Maurice Joly's, with the Dialogue in Hell, which apparently is the Machiavelli text. And it's an interesting text, actually. You read it, but it turns out that the source of this documentation provided to Philip Graves in the Times, confirming the forgery, It just so happened to come from Alan Dulles, who was in Constantinople developing relationships in post-Ottoman political structures for the Office of Strategic Services, the precursor to the CIA.
CIA did that shit.
I mean, I'm like, bro, and you read the protocols, and it reads like a Zionist manifesto to basically, well, I'll say the protocols purport to document the minutes of a late 19th century meeting attended by world Jewish leaders and the elders of Zion, who for example, the protocols include plans to subvert the morals of the non-Jewish world, subvert Western society morally, plans for Jewish bankers to control the world's economies through central banking networks, plans for Jewish control of the press, and ultimately plans for the destruction of modern civilization. But it like I said, it's pretty extraordinary, but it's longer than you would ever imagine.
Yeah,
and
the
basic doctrine
shit right there.
I'm not playing, man.
Yeah.
All that I thought of was that the moment I was reading into this, and protocol number 1, the basic doctrine is right, lies, and might, right? And they proceed to cover economic war and disorganization, lead to international government honestly, man, it reads like there's some sort of effort by an elite cabal of Zionists that they refer to as the Elders of Zion. And there's even reference to the claim that Walter Rathenau, the German Jewish politician who was assassinated, right? The claim is that he was assassinated because he was allegedly an elder of Zion. And so it's really strange. And when you look into it, you find, like, for example, they have, like, who are the elders is written under the protocols, and it says it's a secret which has not been revealed. They are the hidden hand. They are not the Board of Deputies, the Jewish Parliament in England, or the Universal Israelite Alliance, which sit in Paris, but the late Walter Rathenau of the Allgemeiner, I can't pronounce it all, it's all in German, has thrown a little light on the subject, and doubtless he was in possession of their names, being in all likelihood one of the chief leaders himself. And in December 24th, 1912, Walter Rathenau said, 300 men, each of whom knows all the others, govern the fate of the European continent, and they elect their successors from their entourage. And that immediately reminded me of the Committee of 300 and Dr. John Coleman, and and the episode that I did on that. But the principles and morality of these Latter-day Protocols, it says in the actual document, is basically as old as the tribe of Israel. And here is one from the 15th century, which Jews can hardly pronounce a forgery, seeing that it is taken from a Rothschild journal, right? And
wait, what century?
15th century.
Oh, so that'd be like 1600s.
Yeah.
1666. That's
I'm just saying, man.
That's what, the Frankists, the Frankist Sabbateans?
Exactly.
The original Sabbateans and the Frankist Sabbateans, and that's where you get into the connections between the Illuminati, the actual Illuminati, and the Sabbateans, which I forget the two main characters. It was one of the Rothschilds, and then I forget how people uphold the argument, so I am talking at my ass a little bit here, the connections.
Right.
But a lot of people have, have reason to believe, that perhaps one of the Rothschilds, and I believe another, major figure who supposedly was one of the founders of the Illuminati, were Sabbateans. So if you understand what the Sabbateans ideology entails, it's a Judaic messianic movement. So what distinguishes itself from what people typically think of Judaism is that these are ones that believe they're in the Messianic times, whether they think that means the Messiah is either already present or coming or has already come or whatever. A lot of, at least there's only 3 Messianic movements that I know of, and I'm not a Judaic scholar at all, but so maybe there are others. But you have the original Sabbateans, and then the Sabbatean Frankists, and then you have the God, who the fuck are they? The ones, the tunnel Jews. I can't think what the fuck they are. The modern day ones. They're also to some extent a Messianic movement. And the thing is, with the original Sabbateans and the Sabbatean Frankists,
They're not Ashkenazi, right?
No, fuck.
No, that's
the
actual
the
race.
Lubavitch, Chabad.
Chabad. Okay.
Chabad, Lubavitch, or whatever the fuck.
Yep.
Yeah, those are the ones. Those were the ones that had the tunnels. So, but I don't. I mean, obviously, I don't know. Obviously, if this was the case with the Chabad, they probably wouldn't say it and keep this, probably completely quiet. So I'm not saying if this is the case one way or the other. The tunnels makes me raise an eyebrow like, what's going on? Is this the case? But either way, the previous 2 Messianic movements, their understanding was once the Messianic times came, it flipped the law. And by law, biblical law, which, is typically going to be like morality, stuff like that. So they were doing fucked up shit. Like, and you can literally look up Jewish sources, like, and I mean like literally like, I don't know, like ADL or fucking, those type of places. I believe I read some article from like a Jewish museum, very Jewish, and they were saying how they were essentially they believed the law had been flipped because they're in Messianic times, and they were saying they were doing stuff like incest and stuff. A lot of people make insinuations that maybe the Sabbateans are where some of the pogroms may have came from. Some of the premises of the pogroms came from, which okay, maybe that's the case. I don't know. I mean, this kind of gets to our point earlier where it's like not all Jews, kind of deal. So it's like there could be sects within it that have kind of subverted or whatever.
Exactly.
So that would be the idea, and obviously that's an alarming concept, is that they would flip the law. So what does that mean? It means like everything essentially becomes permitted. So, which is kind of fucking wild. Also a fun fact, the Star of David is actually the Star RM fan. So that is not actually a biblical thing, the Star of David. So,
wow.
And which kind of is a little bit telling. And if you see the people who created it, what Herzl was a fucking atheist. You have obviously the Rothschilds, so it's like, I don't know what the fuck's going on here. This doesn't really seem like people like to make this religious thing. I guess this kind of ties into too one of the chats here. I think a lot of times people play this game where they kind of hide the ball between race, religion.
Right.
Which is it? Well, this kind of ties into the idea of the race aspect, which I don't believe that modern Jews have much to do with ancient Israelites. You're right. The majority of the people in that area, ironically, we were talking about like the tribe of Ishmael, which is kind of like the Arabs. They've essentially, most of the people that were there essentially stayed there, and a lot of them converted or maintained their faith or whatever. So a lot of these same people, ironically, the ancient Israelites, their ancestors are not the pasty-skinned people living in Israel. They're likely the descendants of the people that are being bombed. So so there's your irony right there. But yes, and which is like what this becomes this weird hide the ball thing, because it so often gets held up on race or religion, and it's like, well, a lot of these people aren't even religious, and they're not even of the race likely.
Right.
So it's like, what kind of weird ass, like, I don't know, it's this weird amalgamation of it where they're able to kind of play both sides. And I mean, really it just comes down to like it is sort of a race in a sense, but it's not even like the original race anymore. So yeah, at least that's my opinion. Go ahead.
I was just the protocols, honestly, man, they read like a Zionist manifesto, and it reads like it's shocking, because it seems like it was disturbing to me, because it most definitely how can you just overwhelmingly dismiss offhand that there's any truth to it? Because that's the difficulty, is that when you look at where we are, the modern concept of, like I said, the overrepresentation in every aspect of society that you can basically point to. I mean, it's concerning. And so when you read the protocols, it seems like the implication is there's an elite cabal of elders of Zion, Zionists that they refer to as the elders, and that they were willing to sacrifice as many Jews as it took in order to usher in these protocols. And so they viewed it, at least the implication is that they viewed the sacrifice of the average Jew as perfectly valid, because they were even less than the Goyim in their mind. And this was stated. Yeah. And so it's just, it's very disturbing that the idea would be that they would help facilitate the rise of Hitler to power in Germany in order to grant a pretext for like an unquestionable formation of a new state that would never be questioned, right? They would have a blank check, right? And so again, I'm not saying that, like I just mentioned, this is an elite cabal. They do not concern themselves with the average Jew, right? And so it's very unfortunate that it's so easily conflated into anti-Semitism to even suggest that this would be possible, right? That there could be some sophisticated, organized, plot to usher in a mass sacrifice of Jews that they viewed to be, like I said, less than the Goyim. And I just, when you read all the way back to the Revue des I can't pronounce it again. It's freaking German, but when it's a paper financed by James de Rothschild, okay, and published in 1889. 2 documents which showed how true, allegedly, the protocols are in saying that the learned elders of Zion have been carrying on their plan for centuries. And the protocols are lined with examples like this. On January 13th, 1489, a Jewish rabbi, Kimor, a Jewish rabbi of Erles in Provence, wrote to the Grand Sanhedrin, which had its seat in Constantinople, for advice, as the people of Arles were threatening the synagogues. What should the Jews do? This was the reply. Dear beloved brethren in Moses, we have received your letter in which you tell us of the anxieties and misfortunes which you are enduring. We are pierced by as great pain to hear it as yourselves. The advice of the grand satraps and rabbis is the following. 1. As for what you say that the King of France obliges you to become Christians, do it, since you cannot do otherwise. But let the law of Moses be kept in your hearts. As for what you say about the command to despoil you of your goods, the law was that on becoming converted Jews gave up their possessions. Make your sons merchants, that little by little they may despoil the Christians of theirs. As for what you say about their making attempts on your lives, make your sons doctors and apothecaries, that they may take away Christians' lives. As for what you say of their destroying your synagogues, make your sons canons and clerics in order that they may destroy their churches. As for the many other...
Right here.
100%, brother.
Like Sabbatean's whole thing was subversion. Like that was their thing. The original, I forget what, Sabtai Zivi, the original one, I think it was like 1200, 1300, something, 1400, somewhere in that range. He converted to Islam and essentially under duress, essentially, and
Right.
his followers did as well. And then I believe not Leo Frank, but I forget the Frankist one, the second coming, essentially, the Frankist ones in 1666. That one, they became Catholics. So, and then his followers
Wow.
did as well. So that was their thing, is subversion,
My God,
which
brother.
is kind of the inversion of the law, the idea that
100%,
they
man.
are able to deceive, do whatever. And also, there's also pragmatic reasons as well, because
100%.
there was shit going on where the average Jew would be like, yeah, I'm totally a Catholic.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, no doubt.
So fair enough, but there
Fair
also was
enough.
a top-down thing as well. It seems like possibly. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I didn't know if you had
No, you're good.
Yeah.
But it does continue on, and that so that he says, as for the many other vexations you complain of, arrange that your sons become advocates and lawyers, and see that they always mix themselves up with the affairs of state, in order that by putting Christians under your yoke, you may dominate the world and be avenged on them. Do not swerve from this order.
Rumble, if we're sorry, go on.
No, you're good. You're good.
Go ahead.
What did you say?
I was just reminding him we're on Rumble as hard as we're going today. We're
Yeah.
on Rumble. If we're not on
Yeah.
YouTube next week, we'll definitely be on Rumble. But go on.
So, but he ends this, and this again, man, like remember, this is from the 15th century, right? Like, my God. And so he says, do not swerve from this order that we give you, because you will find by experience that, humiliated as you are, you will reach the actuality of power. In the year of 1844, on the eve of the Jewish Revolution of 1848, Benjamin Disraeli, he claimed in his novel, at least it was published in his novel Coningsby, the world is governed by very different personages from what is imagined by those who are not behind the scenes. And he went on to show that these personages were all of Jewish descent. He said, now that Providence has brought to the light of day these secret protocols, that all men may clearly see the hidden personages specified by Disraeli at work behind the scenes of all the governments, this revelation entails on all peoples the grave responsibility of examining and revising our fond their attitude towards the race and nation which boasts of its survival over all empires. It's really insane when you read through it, because there is a symbolic snake of Judaism in the protocols. Mm-hmm. And it opens, like in Protocol 3, it opens up with a there's like 24, I think, overall, I think is the number of protocols, but Protocol 3 opens with a reference to the symbolic snake of Judaism. And in the epilogue to the 1905 edition of the protocols, it gives the following interesting account of this symbol. According to the records of secret Jewish Zionism, Solomon and other Jewish learned men already in 929 BC thought out a scheme and theory for a peaceful conquest of the whole universe by Zion. As history developed, this scheme was worked out in detail and completed by men who were subsequently initiated in this question. These learned men decided by peaceful means to conquer the world for Zion with the slyness of the symbolic snake, whose head was to represent those who have been initiated into the plans of the Jewish administration, and the body of the snake to represent the Jewish people. The administration was always kept secret, even from the Jewish nation itself. As this snake penetrated into the hearts of the nations which it encountered, it undermined and devoured all the non-Jewish power of these states. It is foretold that the snake has still to finish its work, strictly adhering to the design plan until the course which it has to run is closed by the return of its head to Zion, and until, by this means, the snake has completed its round of Europe and has encircled it, and until, by dint of enchaining Europe, it has encompassed the whole world. This it is to accomplish by using every endeavor to subdue the other countries by an economic conquest. And you could just read this all day long. I mean, it really is. It's extraordinary when you actually read the level of detail as well. And they use the term goyim for Gentiles or non-Jews throughout the whole document, but it does map the course of this symbolic snake, right? And I mean, it takes you through stages where, in like Europe in 429 BC, in Greece, about the time of Pericles, the snake first started eating into the power of that country, and then it provides all these excruciating details. And when I went through them for the first time, I found that, that apparently Hitler had even quoted the protocols in Mein Kampf, like I said. And he said, this is what he said in Mein Kampf. He said, the protocols are based on a forgery, the Frankfurter Zeitung moans, every week, which is the best proof that they are authentic. The important thing is that with positively terrifying certainty, they reveal the nature and activity of the Jewish people and expose their inner contexts as well as their ultimate final aims. But I just thought it was very interesting, right? Because I think that how many people would even consider thumbing through the protocols of the elders of Zion? I mean, let alone at least consider that it's a possibility, right? And so, again, full disclosure, in no way do I think that Jewish people should be, associated even with the Zionist movement. I mean, I just think it's very sloppy to ever do that. And I'm not a collectivist. I despise collectivism. I honestly believe it's a means of imprisonment, and it's going to be utilized to further subdue us by dividing us into these subgroups.
I find it collectivism when, like, it's almost collectivist, like, knee-jerk reaction when we have these conversations and people go, oh, you mean the Jews? And then when you're like, no, I don't literally mean every Jew. And they still operate under the assumption that you're meaning literally every Jew. It's like, we can't have this conversation about, what we mean. Like what we're like, if you apply any sort of good faith, you know what you mean. All right, let's get through some more of these chats. Guys, we got over 550 people watching this live. So if you guys want to call in, I'm probably going to do maybe 10 to 20 more minutes of this. I don't have to work tomorrow, so I don't have as much of an impetus to get out of here. But I got Laney here. So the North Star is Israel. They don't need to meet up to tweet in unison. It's already programmed in. And then follow up like that Lord of the Rings fire signal. Who's it? What's it? The fucking flames of Gondor have been lit. Or he was referring to the conversation we were talking about with Candace and the idea that I was making out that maybe marching orders. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying there's some vast conspiracy. I do think they're probably this was too. I don't know. This logical trick that I was watching play out in real time seemed too coordinated, too prominent to be just happen that way. I'm not saying some wide conspiracy, but you just need a small handful of people with large enough accounts to lay out these ideas, and then enough people will parrot it and just kind of amplify it, and then it kind of catches fire. You don't need a ton of people to do that. So it's a mix of both. And then I also do think there was just people who did, they go, oh my God, the fucking star of Rant Fun has been lit, and fucking immediately like, oh God. So yes, that's I also got JC said coffee's the reason Jose stands up the whole podcast. Yes, that's right. For those who aren't aware, I stand. I don't know. It's just energy. If I find it helpful to stand. And yes, the coffee help. FoxandSons.com. Use Jose at checkout. Let me see. What else we got? Looks like Glenn Beck and Alex Stein will hold down the conservative crew.
Alex Stein, dude. I fucking love Alex.
Yeah, I wouldn't consider Alex conservative.
No,
I
me
guess
neither.
sort of is. I guess he
Yeah.
is. I don't
Well,
know.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
But I
whatever.
definitely, I just love the culture jamming. Like,
Yeah.
man, like it's just so
Sometimes it's
necessary.
stupid. I'll be honest. I get annoyed
Oh
by it
yeah,
sometimes. But I
100%.
mean, I guess I don't know. Maybe he's going over a little bit of like, not everything hits, but I mean, when they do hit, I'm
Right.
like, okay. But
I know.
sometimes just
We
being a
definitely
naughty
need
fuck.
people doing that though. Like, I do find it valuable.
Yeah. But we got anything else worth bringing up in here? The Jesuits. Someone said do the
Oh man,
Jesuits next. It's always a multi-power,
it's gonna
multipolar
happen,
power
bro.
structure. And there are a few captains of the pyramid. You know what? I'm gonna go ahead and say it. It's one of those things that like I've been afraid to say it for so long. I don't even really know what the fuck a Jesuit is. I always hear it brought up in
Right.
like conspiracy stuff. I don't know. I don't know what a Jesuit is. Like, what the fuck is a Jesuit? Anyone know
I'm
what a Jesuit
honestly,
is?
I know of it as like sort of like I thought it was some sort of ideological perspective within Catholicism that I just wasn't aware of. But I'm not
Yeah.
certain, honestly, because I know it's always overlapping in regard to the secret societies
Yes.
in every aspect of everything that I research, and it seems like all of these individuals who are operating within this network, operating, within this I guess this black market network, under the veil of what the public is aware of. They are always somehow connected to Jesuits by being Jesuit trained, or for example, in the Finders, like the whole notion was that they were the two that were originally arrested in Tallahassee, Florida, with the children, were allegedly on their way to some Jesuit compound in Mexico. And what they claimed was some school for, advanced children or something. But in reality, it was some Jesuit training facility. And so once again, I didn't include that in my podcast. But of course, the Jesuits are implicated. So I do think that it's something worthwhile. I will most definitely be. I'm going to have to, like, I would isolate it myself. That way I can fully understand it and try and be able to explain it, because there's no coincidence that seemingly the Jesuit order is always involved in these networks. So yeah, and I've even read where I think John Coleman, it might have been Eustace Mullins, wrote in their book about that every president who's been selected out of the Chatham House in the City of London has Jesuit affiliation. So it's very possible.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. All right, guys, we're getting near the end of the chat, so I'm probably going to wrap it up here soon. I guess no one wants to call in this week. I don't know. Like I said, we are over 550 people. I guess none of you guys want to talk to us. I got Laney said, check academics article on Jewish IQ, good short history lesson. I don't know about that one. I've never read it, but I did bring that up just because I just felt like I know people always bring up Jewish IQ, and that's kind of why we have these things. And don't get me wrong, I think I had Pete on the show. There was a Rumble only episode a while ago because we went hard. We went into the podcast.
I listened to that one. I enjoyed that.
We touched on that a little bit. The idea that because people always bring up like, oh, why are Jews doing so well? And it's like people always go, well, it's because we're fucking smarter than you. And like, there's some truth to that. I think on average, if you're looking at groups, the Jewish group does tend to have a higher IQ, but there are other groups that have higher IQ and have nowhere near the what's the word I'm looking for? I mean, infiltration might not be the right word for it, but because it's like I don't know, the influence, I guess, or whatever you're looking for. So like I think like Asians, I believe, have higher. There are other groups that have higher IQs, so I don't think you can necessarily sum it up as that.
Exactly.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, a lot of that too is just that, I do think to some extent there is a good argument that a lot of this is due to that, Jewish, whether it be strong families or whatever you want to say grew out of that culture. There is something, to say for their success, and props to them for that. But there also is, to some extent, like on the high up level, as we've kind of been talking about here, there's like a different way, different modes of analysis to be had. There might be something more to it on the higher level, but on the lower level, your buddy who's your Jewish buddy who's a doctor or a lawyer or whatever. I don't necessarily think he was told by some fucking Jewish elite, that would say, "Hey,
Right.
be a doctor" or whatever. I don't think it's that simple, and I don't even necessarily think it's like a bad thing that they are. But there is something to. I do think that as you were making out, like with the snake idea, the head of the snake and then the body,
Right.
it's kind of like, to some extent, this was values that were impressed upon them, and I'm sure there probably also are possibly people that have taken on those roles with I don't know, with bad ideas. But just the idea that if you impress that upon a culture to be that way, it's not necessarily bad, and it's good for those people. But at the same extent, they also know there's some sort of in-group preference there. So if we can get these people in these certain positions, that when the time comes, when the star of Remfan has been lit, you can go, oh shit. And now you have all these people within these positions of influence. But I think that we're getting to a point where maybe we're just getting to where, the class consciousness or whatever fuck you want to say has gotten to an extent to where I don't think that's gonna work anymore. I think we're getting to a point where people are breaking away from the collective mindsets, even a lot of Jews, So, but just obviously
Man, I hope so.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I'm always reminded of Yuri Bezmenov every fucking time I think of collectivism and the Long March, because I just see it. It's so clear that we're all divided into these subgroups, that we're all at each other's throats for honestly, we all share a common enemy. It is so ridiculous that we would ever imagine that we have any other enemy than our shared common enemy of the state. And so when I watch Yuri Bezmenov tell G. Edward Griffin in 1984 about the 4 stages of ideological subversion, it rings true, man. I mean, it feels like where we find ourselves, right? Like they used these advanced techniques honed through the Frankfurt School and the Tavistock Institute, and they learned how to socially engineer a global society, it seems, in many ways, right? Not only one nation. And I mean, when Yuri Bezmenov, he was like technically he was a KGB defector, but he was like the son of a high-ranking Soviet officer. I mean, he was even educated in the elite schools in the Soviet Union, and was an expert in Indian culture and Indian languages, and worked for like this KGB front that was called Nevesty, and he allegedly escaped in 1970, and then apparently he was totally disgusted with the Soviet system, which is possible, but he he seemed to be like one of the world's outstanding experts on Soviet propaganda and disinformation and active measures. And like G. Edward Griffin asked him to explain the phrase ideological subversion. And he responds by saying that what it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite an abundance of information, no one is able to come to a sensible conclusion in the interest of defending themselves, their family, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow and is divided into 4 basic stages. The first one being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years required to educate a generation of students in the country of your enemy, exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism, Leninism, ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of American patriotism. the highest art of warfare. And of course, I would like to mention that I don't think we need to be socially engineered into the basic values of American patriotism either. Honestly, I think that maybe you should homeschool your children and socially engineer them yourselves, because it might be the best result. But and man, he just continues on listing these 4 stages, and it defines our reality to this day. It really does. I just feel like this is exactly what happened to us. And I don't believe that it's some foreign enemy from abroad who has infiltrated our nation and convinced us to go through with a controlled demolition of our own society. Man, I don't see that. I see like a global framework, right? And it really does feel like inevitably the tiptoe toward totalitarianism, the gradual. I mean, we are inevitably reaching that point where, what did I just see? The SWIFT financial system is they're basically working to figure out a way to implement these central bank digital currencies, and I mean, it's just like, man, that's obviously the goal, right? And I don't understand how anybody thinks that that's a conspiracy theory. I mean, they're saying it, they're admitting it, they're acknowledging it, and they're proud of it, man.
Yeah.
Right?
All right, I'm going to do probably one more chat because I realized I missed this one. And I think we're going to probably roll out of here after that. If anyone wants to try squeezing a call in the meantime, feel free to. Did you guys see that 50 Cent has a docu-series ready to go already? I'd assume that's related to the Diddy shit, is what that is. I don't know enough about 50 to know to assume whether he got butt fucked or not. Yeah,
Well,
I don't know.
apparently,
I mean,
Dr. Dre's gay.
Like 50, didn't 50 come up with, I mean, I don't know enough about rap, but I remember, because I feel like he was big when I was like in high school, and I feel like he used to be like associated with like some sort of other crew, so maybe that's what enabled him to kind of like rise up, as opposed to being maybe associated. I'm just talking on my ass a little bit here, so maybe he wasn't associated with.
Remember, he was a part of G Unit with like Young Buck and all those different dudes. Yeah,
so maybe
and
they weren't
Tony Yayo and and but I know he was brought on to Aftermath, the Dre's label, because Eminem found him. Like Eminem discovered him somehow. That's as the story goes. Yeah.
Oh, he was butt fucking then. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. Yeah.
This is your. I mean, in fact, it's ready to go. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's a. Was it a limited? Maybe it's a limited hangout. I don't know.
Right.
I would.
Hey, Neil Amish dude.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Finish.
Oh no, what were you gonna say? Oh, you just want to know if the captain was vaccinated.
Yeah. Oh
well,
man,
hey
man, it looks like Kate was vaccinated.
Yeah.
We found her ass.
Oh yeah. They found her. She's got what, cancer or some shit. I don't even know what to make of that. I don't know.
Man,
I mean,
I will say,
I don't know.
after Dr. Robert Malone, and I mean, who knows? I don't know. I don't trust anybody, so I don't know how much you can trust Robert Malone, but I will say that the fact that one of the creators of the mRNA technology goes and goes and talks to British Parliament and 100% goes on record claiming that the COVID vaccine is very likely the cause of a lot of these turbo cancers that are affecting global society as of this moment. And I think that claim alone, being on public record, is pretty amazing, right? Mm-hmm. And then beyond that, I mean, I wouldn't put it. I mean, it's possible that, right? She was, and we know she got vaccinated, but who knows? I'm not always saying that that's a direct, correlation or cause, but anyway, I've just seen how the COVID vaccines affected people that I know and love, and people, within my orbit. And man, I've had best friends go into comas for 2 weeks. I've had, it's like, I've had friends, family members, diagnosed with turbo cancer, right?
Yeah. I
And
actually got
so
I have a big I'm gonna have a COVID episode dropping on a Friday with I had the Nadeau guy on, and he was I believe wasn't I don't know exactly he was some sort of in the medical field in the military, I believe Navy, when that was all kicking off, and then he got out and started his Nadeau business. And so he had a lot to say about that. So it'll be interesting. But I think we're probably at a good time to start wrapping it up. It's late.
sounds good, brother.
Want to let me? You got anything coming up that you want to let us know about, or just let them know where they can find you at and that kind of stuff?
Hopefully, I'll get to the bottom of Watergate. We'll see what actually happened there. And I guess Nick Bryant's book is already out, so now I'm pissed I don't have it. So I'm gonna have to figure that out. But honestly, I'm about to fully I'm about to fully fall down the rabbit hole, and it's going to be a dark few days as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, beyond that, man. Oh, remind me next week to ask you about Cody Snodgrass, because
Oh yeah.
I never asked you about that,
Yeah.
but I think it's worth having a conversation about. But anyway,
Yeah, sure. We can do that. No problem. Yeah.
cool.
I'm sorry.
Other than that, yeah, man, just at the Underclass Podcast on Instagram, at Underclass Pod on Twitter, and you can find the podcast on all audio streaming platforms for the most part.
All right, awesome. I'm going to be on Andy Malafrina's show on Thursday.
Awesome.
So for those, I
He's
think
great,
it's a live
man.
stream. Yeah, I love him. He's cool.
Yeah.
I'm not sure which show it is because I think he runs like 3 or 4 of them.
I know. I
But,
told him we should get him on here at some point, just have fun.
Yeah,
That
for
would be a
sure.
good
Yeah, that would be
time.
fun. He definitely have a good time on here. But yeah, if you guys like my show, I know you're going to probably repost this on yours. So if you want to check me out, this is a No Way Jose show. It's on YouTube, all the major art podcasters, Odyssey, Rumble as well. Follow me on Twitter at TowerGangJose. Yeah, also, I do want to give a quick shout out to my patrons, my patron sponsor level. I have my buddy Toad at Tower Gang Toad, at Abrogate D's, Kevin B. Clark, a full-time guitarist, private music teacher in the New York area, then at ZOVERACK, then at _Infinite Zeal, then Jacob Daniel of the Biblical Anarchy podcast at Biblical Anarchy, the homie Tim Tuttle at Jolly on Klebold, and then at Stinky Sock 420, singer of the band Bender, which is a metalcore band. So if you like metalcore like I do, you'll probably dig that. And with that, we are out.